Folks, it is the beginning of February, but just like January, the sports are electric and keep on coming. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Buckeye Sports Breakdown, a show about teams from the great state of Ohio. I'm Mahirson Hassan. Thanks for tuning in. Today, I'm recapping the Bengals season fresh off their AFC Championship loss to the Chiefs, and I will also look at each Division I college basketball team in the state to see their chances of getting to the big dance. But first, let's take a look at the quick hits. Preseason has kicked off for the MLS teams. For Cincinnati, they have gone unbeaten through their first two games, winning 3-2 against Austin FC last Friday and beating University of South Florida 3-0, both of which taking place at Bradenton, which they have done throughout the years. Another good pickup for FC Cincinnati as they've gotten Yerson Mosquera, a defender from the Wolverhampton Wolves from the Premier League. Helps with Jeff Cameron, who departed the team after the end of last season. Columbus Crew will kick off their preseason tomorrow at 12:30 Eastern as they host the Pittsburgh Riverhounds from the USL at Lower.com Field. Elsewhere, Johnny Gaudreau will be representing the Blue Jackets, the only Blue Jacket at the All-Star game this weekend, the NHL All-Star game, that is, down in South Florida. In 44 games, he has produced 12 goals and 29 assists. Johnny Hockey showing out and showing up well for Columbus this year, despite a pretty disappointing season for the team. The Cavs have a road trip this weekend, first to Indianapolis to take on the Pacers, and then to the nation's capital to take on the Wizards, fresh off a double-digit win versus the Grizzlies, trying to build on to kind of that stature. I mean, of course, as I said, you got the Pacers and the Wizards, not as good on paper compared to the Grizzlies. So expect the Cavs to make good use and, simply put, do their job. So let's get to the Bengals. Of course, I know I've heard the news. The refs screwed the Bengals. I mean, they kind of did. They kind of did. On that last play, sure, it should have been holding, despite the Joseph Asai call, which I think that was the right call. Honestly, in my opinion, I'm not arguing that call. That's a foul any day of the week. And it's unfortunate that the Bengals season came down to that. And again, could have been holding, yeah. But you think about it, in the grand scheme of things in that game, the refs didn't play that big of an advantage towards the Chiefs as many people are making it out to be. Think about the third down redo after the holding call extending the Chiefs' drive. Did they get points at the end of that drive? They didn't. The Bengals kept up their determination the game, and they showed it there on those final drives. Again, I think if there's anybody to blame here, I actually have to blame it on the offense. Again, played a decent game, but if you think about it, the way they played in that second half too, where they took the deep shot to T. Higgins to get the touchdown, they throw a deep shot to Jamar. Keep in mind, on a fourth down at the 40-yard line. I mean, those are some guts right there from Zach Taylor and crew to make that call. My question is that the Bengals didn't use a tactic that they used a lot in Chiefs games, mainly the ones at Paycor Stadium, where they had the ball late. Think about back in 2021, the regular season game, fourth down and goal at the 1-yard line. The Bengals decided to go for it and not kick the field goal. Again, got a little lucky with the Chiefs penalty, run down the clock, kick the winning field goal at the death, and they win. Similarly, it happened in the 2022 regular season, where third down and 10, fourth down and 10. Bengals are up by 3 points. They could kick a field goal, but again, you're giving the ball back to Kansas City with the chance to score and win the game. Bengals decide to go for it. Burrow finds T, ball game, and the Bengals run the clock out. That was necessarily not what happened on that last drive. Sure, they let the clock run low, but I think what the Bengals should have done, despite that intentional grounding call, is utilize Joe Mixon a little bit. Utilize those kind of short routes, kind of Hayden Hurst-like. You don't have to take the deep shot down the field. You know you can do that, and they've shown it throughout the season and throughout the fourth quarter. I actually would have said, take this clock down, even if Drew Chrisman gets that punt and, the Chiefs return it back the way they did in that game. At least you have a little leeway, not too much time, and Mahomes has to really do some magic instead of a lot of leeway, which the Bengals gave to them, of course, going throughout the end of the game, which ended up being the Chiefs winning it. So, again, kind of an unfortunate matchup for them. But nonetheless, I got to say, last year was a good season. This year was a good season, and I think could have been a great season because I think the Bengals this year, the biggest question for them was 2021 a fluke? And Wayne Boxmiller said it last week. He was on the show to talk about the Bengals and the upcoming AFC Championship at the time. And he said that the Bengals deserve to be in that highest tier. And had they won, they could be the best team in the AFC. You have to think about it, though. Like I said, back to back AFC championships, back to back AFC North championships, both of which for the first time in history. Again, we know there's a new era in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow and crew. And this year kind of proved it. 12-4 on the year in regular season. Had the Bills game been played and not been a no contest, the Bengals could have been 13-4, which would have made this season then their best overall record in the regular season, which would have been something to say about it. Just in the second year of the Joe Burrow regime, I gotta say. And the other thing too, I think that people don't realize is that winning streak at the end. The Bengals had a 10-game win streak going into their game against the Chiefs. Just to put that in perspective, in 2015, they started off the year 8-0. That's an 8-game win streak, and then they kind of faltered to a 12-4 record overall. Again, I gotta say, sure, the Bengals had their inconsistencies early on in the season, and when it comes to the playoffs, it kind of haunts them in the end, and maybe it shows playing at Arrowhead, not Burrowhead, and not Paycor Stadium for those games. But nonetheless, again, if you put the Chiefs, you put the Bills as Super Bowl contenders. When the odds come out for 2023, I expect to see the Bengals up there with the Chiefs and the Bills because they're a consistent team. And again, I mean, people I think are understanding the fact that the refs have been screwing the team. Of course, Bengals fans have been saying on Twitter all the time, like, look at this play. It's a rough play at the refs. And again, give the refs I'll give them some grace, not too much, but nonetheless, again, I think Dan Horde said it best this past week. He was on Off the Bench with Tom Brenneman on Chatterbox Sports, and he said that despite there being pressure from this team, making it to the Super Bowl and then playing well throughout the season, maybe to try to get that Lombardi, he ended up saying, forget the first 52 years of Bengals history. This is a new day. This is a new day overall. Again, if you've been a Bengals fan for a long time, this team has had some struggles. I mean, I started being a Bengals fan around 2010. So last year of Carson Palmer going into Andy Dalton's era with the Bengals. And I got to say, it's been an interesting ride. It's been an interesting ride as a Bengals fan overall. And I have to agree, it is a new day. You have to forget those first 52 years of history because when you look at that, then the pressure starts getting to you as a Bengals fan. Maybe not for Joe and the offense and the defense, for all the players really, but especially as a fan, you almost have to clear your mind and be like, well, you kind of have to act like it, simply put. And the other fact of the matter is, I should point this out as well. We're in an era too where a lot of teams are consecutively making it to the AFC Championship, right? Or Conference Championship in general, I should say. Tom Brady, of course, congrats on his retirement. Maybe he stays retired, maybe not. If not, we'll see him in the booth with Fox Sports. Let's see how he does as a color. But nonetheless, he made it to the AFC Championship. That was the 2021 season. So 2012. His last appearance there was in 2021. So let's see, that's about 10 consecutive years of making a conference championship. Actually, no, pardon me, I should take that back. That's 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 8 consecutive. Pardon me. I forgot in 2019 they didn't make it. They got out of the wild card. But you get my point, right? 8 consecutive championships there. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, not only have they been to 5 consecutive AFC championships, they've hosted all of those 5. I mean, we're living in that regime. And if the Bengals can pull it off, if they can go to the at the very least, the AFC championship in 2023 season, that is, I think it further states the fact that one, That second team to the Chiefs are the Bengals and not the Bills. That's one point. The other point about making it is that there's consistency about it, right? There's consistency. There's a regime. You almost feel, if you're the Bengals in that spot, you almost feel like you're someone like the Pats, how the Pats were, kind of how Ken Stabler and John Madden were with the Raiders, right? Consistently making it to that stage. And I think Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor have the chance to do that. Looking back also at this year, I think it's consistency overall. Again, the Bengals had a flashy offense, and this year people are starting to break down that you can't let Jamar Chase go on too many deep shots. Despite that, though, I gotta say, overall, 4 games missed for Jamar, but still 87 catches, over 1,000 yards, and 9 touchdowns. T. Higgins as well. You have to note, for a while, T. Higgins was the wide receiver one, and maybe that stage might allow teams, maybe not this year, but next year, especially when T goes on the market, to say, are we picking it up and are we giving the Bengals draft picks? You look at T's year overall, 109 targets, similar to 108 in 2020 and 110 in 2021, and 7 touchdowns. Again, if the Bengals are to show any care of T, I think they'll franchise tag him, but I think knowing how he is, he's going to be a valuable part of this team. I think as valuable as Jamar. I think if there's one person for the Bengals in terms of just breaking out on the scene, it's got to be Trenton Irwin. Nobody heard of Trenton Irwin after Jamar went down. I remember back in October, there were talks of, do we get Terrence Marshall on the market? I mean, he played with Joe and crew at LSU. Is there anybody else, right? We got Kwame Lassiter in the draft. Do we get him there? I got to say, it's almost like a rom-com. You're looking for the perfect person, and you never knew, but the perfect person was right with you. And that's the case with Trenton Irwin this year. It's young, cheap, and again, I think when I watched Trenton Irwin play this year, the question I asked was, on the routes he was running, could I see Tyler Boyd or Jamar T running those? And without a doubt, it was yes. I mean, you think about his game against the Pats. There were some routes he ran, especially in the seam, that we see Tyler Boyd run so many times. So again, provides depth. And if he were to leave the Bengals, I think he's going to make a big impact wherever he goes, as long as he's in a good system. Defense. I mean, I know Lou Anarumo's been on the market a lot. I think either recently or coming up soon, he's actually going to be in Phoenix interviewing with the Cardinals, who didn't get Sean Payton. He's now with the Broncos. But anyhow, he's deserving of a job. The way he's turned around this program, I remember in 2018, nobody really wanted Lou Anarumo there because of his schemes. But overall, he got the players, and the players are responding well. You have seen that throughout this year. Overall, very, very good from the defensive standpoint for this team. So when you look at how this defense has played, again, there was that stretch for a while that the Bengals did not allow a second half touchdown. And it was a case overall as well. And again, you have to give Lou Anarumo and the defense credit for that as well. You think about it, I think they were fifth in points allowed. And I think they were either second or third in touchdowns allowed as well. So again, this team showed up and showed out throughout the year. Again, the future, I think the question becomes for the Bengals is, who do you sign back in free agency? And again, there's more case of the Joe Mixon allegations that he does have a misdemeanor for threatening someone. That was the day before the Buffalo Bills divisional game, but I believe the charges are going to be dropped as of now. But beyond Mixon, you have a lot of different players. Again, Jamar will be here till 2025. T's going to be here till 2023. Maybe a chance that T gets extended in 2024 via the franchise tag. But I'm looking at the free agents throughout the year, and I think this is the key for the Bengals. Going into the offseason and going into the draft is, who do you keep? A lot of players are going to be on the market. I think the biggest one, Jesse Bates, who the Bengals franchise tagged. And I think Jesse Bates has made it pretty common. Again, there was that discrepancy in the training camp that whether or not he'll come back. He was holding out for a while. Then he eventually came back. I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know if Jesse Bates is going to come back. But wherever he goes, I think he'll be a great addition. And I think it gives a little upside for the Bengals as well when you look at guys like Dax Hill. I mean, I think one of the reasons why we got, or rather the Bengals got Dax, is to help out with the case that Jesse Bates leave, and he and that is Dax and Von Bell can make a pretty good pairing there with the safety connection. Speaking of which, Von Bell is also on the free agency market. So one of those guys I believe will be brought back. If I were to be a betting man, I would say Von Bell over Jesse Bates. Eli Apple also on the market. Interestingly enough, if you want to bring him back, Hayden Hurst, I think Hayden Hurst might get extended. There are some talks, but I believe he will get extended. Trey Flowers as well got a few snaps here and there, but let's look through the list. I'm gonna just kind of run through and see who's potentially could go on the free agent market. Samaje Perine, Brandon Allen, Drew Sample, Clark Harris, Max Sharping, Michael Thomas, Trent Taylor, Jalen Davis, Jermaine Pratt, Joe Bacci, Travion Williams, Cal Adamitis, Clay Johnson, and Mitchell Wilcox. I think that there's some players you have to bring back without a doubt. Sharping's one of them. Again, hopefully Alex Kappa's back and the Bengals signed the contract for that reason. But I think Sharping provides some benefit overall. Again, not the best guard, and he got beaten a lot in the Chiefs game, but the first few games against the Ravens and Bills, pretty solid overall. Trent Taylor, again, if you want to add a wide receiver, he's been more of a punt returner guy throughout this entire season. So maybe you bring him in, maybe you bring in some kind of speedster. And I think the Bengals are looking for potentially some special teams specialists going on throughout the draft, potentially in the later rounds. Samaje Perine. That's an interesting choice because you have Mixon. But I think the question becomes is the Bengals will keep Mixon, but the question becomes is if Perine's there, do you keep Perine, do you extend him, or do you probably ditch him for maybe a rookie running back, which I think the Bengals might end up doing. I think that may end up happening. Keep Perine there, I don't know if you'll tag Perine, but I think either keep Perine there or you'll have Mixon kind of be that veteran guy and then leave the rookie running back there. So eventually he could potentially take Mixon's spot if he's good enough, that is. So again, I don't expect Samaje Perine to be there. I think if there's one lock, it's got to be Hayden Hurst. Solid production, solid person, solid personnel, and he's loyal to the team. He's going to be there. Played a big impact this year, and I think he could be there. Jermaine Pratt, I mean, he said it too in the locker room after the Chiefs loss. I mean, he was mad mainly because he himself said this was going to be his last year. Again, I don't know if it was a pessimistic or if it's going to be true, but nonetheless, great plays though by Jermaine Pratt. I gotta say, I think wherever he goes, he's going to be remembered in Cincinnati for his interception on Derek Carr in the wild card game because that right there gave the Bengals their first win in 31 years. First time in 31 years the Bengals won a postseason game, and again, the man who made the biggest play of the game, biggest play of the season up to that point, Jermaine Pratt showing up there. So again, wherever these guys go, I just got to say thank you for your service for the Cincinnati Bengals. Again, a lot of you guys picked up an AFC Championship appearance. A lot of you guys played in the Super Bowl. Wherever you go, thank you for all that you did. So that's our talk. And with that, the 2022 Bengals season has come to an end. I'll take a quick break. And after that, I'll be back to talk about college basketball and the teams from the state of Ohio that have a chance or not a chance to make it to March Madness. I'll be back. Welcome back to Buckeye Sports Breakdown. We talked about the Bengals earlier on, and now it's time to talk about college basketball. I mean, from now until February, when spring training and the MLS season is back underway, this is going to be my main focus for a while. And because of that, let's take a look at every college basketball team from the state of Ohio and their chances to get into March Madness. I'm Mahir Hassan, and thanks for tuning in. I'll be ranking these teams off different categories, mainly off of colors, green, yellow, or red. If a team is a green, they're a lock or almost a lock to make the tournament. If they're a yellow, they might get in, but some work will definitely be needed between now, conference championship, and whenever the selection show will be. And red basically means little or no chance. Make a Cinderella run to winning your conference championship. Otherwise, you're heading to NIT. Simply put, you're not going to the big dance. We'll start off with Xavier, only team from Ohio in the top 25 right now. Had a close win versus Providence. I mean, it came down to the final play, and Providence could not put the buzzer beater away. Soleil Boom had a great quote. He was talking with Big East's John Fanta at the end of the game, and he said, whenever you're contending for a title, you got to win your home games. And they've definitely done it this year, Xavier. Sean Miller even said after the game that whoever wins that Big East regular season title is a contender to make the Final Four. This team, and mainly the Big East in general, has a lot of belief going forward. They will stay in the top four, according to Joe Lunardi. Interestingly enough, if they win and Indiana beats another Ohio team, Kent State, we could have a rematch of that thriller at Cintas Center earlier this season. So you look at it, they've got 8 games left. You've got road trips versus Marquette and Providence, both in the top 25, also both eyeing for that Big East regular season title. It's a big stretch for the end or the first 4 buys or the last 4 out or the next 4 out. Not necessarily the case so far, as for the first time in a while, Ohio State is neither in one of those 4 categories. In fact, they are completely out of the tournament. The Big Ten right now has 8 bids in the bracket. This is a solid stretch for Ohio State. And overall, it's a big stretch overall if they want to be in that top 8 overall. When you look at Ohio State's schedule, again, they faced those big teams like Purdue, but they haven't been on a good stretch since, as they lost to Wisconsin 65-60. I believe that game was yesterday. If you look at the Buckeyes' schedule, most of the games they're playing are against teams that are currently in the top part of the Big Ten standings. They've got a game against Purdue, a game against Illinois, a game against Northwestern, and Iowa, all of which are kind of in the top half, a home and road game against Michigan State, who's kind of in the middle of the pack. So nonetheless, Ohio State needs to get some wins here. And I think if they can get some wins, they can get into that top 8 realm in the Big Ten and maybe are back on track to being a March Madness team. But for sure, right now, they're definitely a yellow. UC, I mean, I honestly am shaking my head at UC right now. You are up by 11 points against number 3 Houston on the road, and you can't close the game out. And I think more than I know, you can say it's a good game, it's a good performance, it brings mentality. Sure, it does. It really does for a team that's been lost, and Wes Miller has really been picking up the pieces over these past year and a half, 2 years. But when you have that opportunity on the road against Houston, that to a Houston team that's coming off a loss at home to Temple, so you're adding insult to injury here. You have to close it out. And for me, for University of Cincinnati, they don't have that many opportunities to get that statement win, to get that win to say, you know what, maybe if they're in a decent seating, if they're in that spot, maybe the committee might consider them. If you look at their standings, they're currently 6-4 in conference. According to bracketology, the only team other than Houston that is getting in will be Memphis. They're one of those middle teams in the 16 that I described earlier. Believe they are in the first 4 buys category. I can check that, but I believe they might be in that category. Yes, they are in the last 4 buys, along with Arkansas, New Mexico, and Northwestern. So UC right now is number 5. If the tournament started today, the Bearcats would be the 5th seed. Again, a chance to maybe make a run, but then you got to face Houston again. And again, you get to that point where you have to get 2 of those statement wins to eventually win the title. I know UC means good, and they've shown some bright spots this year. They've got 3 games against teams that are better than them in the AAC. And honestly, they've got to win it to get at least some sort of chance in the conference tournament. I don't know if Cincinnati has a chance to get in as that second or third team in the AAC. And I believe that's the problem. That's the problem with UC. And that's where I don't really see them as much as a yellow team and now more as a red team, where you're now relying on that conference tournament to get someone there. Now looking at some other teams in Ohio, let's look at UD. Again, started off the year very well, and they've always been a team towards the top when you look at the Atlantic 10. And you think about it, very similar to a lot of other conferences. I've actually seen this development a little bit, where you have a lot of teams that sometimes play well, but when it comes to March Madness, now a lot of these Power Five teams are taking up more of the spots, meaning some of these mid-major conferences, such as Atlantic 10, are now only getting one spot, as has been the case throughout. Today, Lenardi put VCU in that spot to potentially continue it on for Dayton. You look at the Atlantic 10 standings right now. Dayton is number 3 overall, behind St. Louis, who's half a game ahead of them, and VCU, who is a game ahead of them. Overall, like I've said, I think Dayton has turned it around. When I mean turned it around, they've turned their season around, gotten 2 impactful wins at home, one against Richmond and one against Loyola Chicago. But now you've got a road stretch, one against St. Bonaventure tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern, and then against VCU. I think the question is very similar to what we've seen with other teams. Look at Xavier when they beat UConn. Dayton has to win these road games. Otherwise, they're looking more towards the yellow and potentially a red spot. But I think for now, looking at Dayton, they have to be in the yellow spot. Again, big opportunities against VCU and St. Louis. And if they put up a competition in those matchups, yes, they could make a run as a third or second seed to potentially win the Atlantic 10 title. Again, I think very similar to this, even if you don't get those wins, it's a little saving grace for Dayton here. Even if you don't get those wins, it's a very close game in that regards. I'm still having some hope that Dayton has some yellow, and there's an upside, I should say, to become even more yellow, kind of in that murkiness area, to say, you know what, if Dayton does well, even if they get the 1 seed, if they show they have some capacity going forward, why not? Let's put them in, even if they don't win. If they get the 1 seed, there's a chance. If they lose those games by a lot, then they're looking more towards the red. So they're yellow for now, but they've got some upside, but the downside is also kind of there. Let's take a look at the MAC. To be honest, I don't have that much expectations for the MAC. I know that I have a lot of friends that go to MAC schools throughout that conference, and I actually have to apologize to them. I did not know you guys were that good when it comes to just overall tournaments. I'm looking at you, Kent State, Akron, and Toledo, the top 3 teams in the MAC, all from the good old state of Ohio. So let's take a look at this. You've got Kent State 8-1, Akron 8-1, and Toledo 7-2, all in conference. Kent State and Akron play tonight at 9 o'clock Eastern. I don't, to be honest with you, the Sickos community better be watching this, because that's going to be a very interesting game to decide seeding. Granted, the seeding doesn't really help that much since it is at a neutral site. But when you look at how it is between playing as a 3rd seed compared to playing as a 2nd seed, or even that 1st seed, that's a big game overall. I'm just going to go on a little story. So I used to cover boys volleyball in the state of Ohio for my high school, St. Xavier. And every year there were always these 3 teams that were always good in their region. It was Moeller, Elder, and St. X. In fact, this is going to be a really funny story, but because of how stacked that region was, they would send 2 teams to the state tournament every year, and every other region had to comply with it because that region was so damn stacked. Furthermore, I'm trying to point out to the fact that you would always have some regional final game, which in technicality is really a regional semifinal, where it's a third seed against a second seed, and the winner goes to the state. The first seed almost gets a pass. Again, not to downplay the teams in the MAC who could end up making a run. Look at Ohio a couple years ago, ended up as a fifth seed in the tournament and ended up as champions in the end. Again, I'll talk about the Bobcats and their run later on in the show, but nonetheless, when you have that point of being a one seed, it almost feels like you can take a step back and take a deep breath before that big final game. So again, big game in Northeast Ohio tonight. Kent State against Akron. You look at their schedules overall, and this is, I think, the really interesting part about the MAC is a lot of these teams, the three I mentioned, Kent State, Akron, and Toledo, their schedule is only going to get tougher from here. Furthermore, it basically says this is going to be the separation between men amongst boys. You look at their track record so far. Kent State, their only loss was to Northern Illinois. Toledo and Akron both lost to Ball State. Akron's looking to repeat as champions. Kent State last won in 2017. Toledo last won in 1980, the first edition of the MAC championship. Again, like I said, a run could happen, but there's a highly chance that one of these three teams will be representing the MAC and Ohio in the big dance. You look at their schedule ahead. As I mentioned, Kent State and Akron playing tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern in Akron. After that game, they will also play Akron at Kent State. That is Akron and Kent State at Kent State March 3rd, the last regular season game of the schedule. Kent State will also face Ball State on the road, who is currently number 4. Akron has a home and road trip at Kent State and Toledo, and they're home against Ball State. They have got the toughest schedule here. If Akron can withstand and somehow be a 1 seed, they deserve to be there. I don't know if the committee will put them in as an at-large bid, but they sure are going into the tournament as favorites. Toledo, home and road versus Akron, and a road game against Ball State as well. For now, all of these teams are yellow. The question is, because of how rigorous their schedules are, let's see who is still yellow come tournament time about a month from now. Let's take a look at the other Ohio teams in the MAC, Ohio and Miami. Again, the Bobcats and Redhawks have not been good so far this year. OU is currently 3-6, tied for third last, that is, in the league. And their only big tough test on the road, or really throughout the rest of the season, is against Kent State. They could make a run like 21 to the 5th seed. Again, they're about 2 games behind that spot. I should mention, though, that during that run in 2021, 4 games were not played because of COVID, and all 4 of those games were against teams that ended out in the bottom 4. So had those games been played, OU could end up being a 2nd or 3rd seed, but they ended out as a 5th seed and ended out beating the number 1 seed, which I believe was Toledo that year. For now, they're red. Miami 1-8, dead last. They've got to make a miracle run and win it all in the MAC tournament to make it. They're also red. And last but not least, the Horizon League. You've got Youngstown State, Cleveland State, and Wright State, who are the teams in Ohio. Youngstown State, the Penguins, doing pretty well this year, 11-3 in the conference. Part of a 3-way tie right now that includes Milwaukee and Northern Kentucky, although Youngstown State lost to both of them earlier this year. You take a look at that team's schedule. You do have a matchup against Milwaukee and a little bit. You also have a matchup on the road at Cleveland State. We'll get to them later. But again, overall, a good upside for Youngstown State, and you got a little home field advantage. They're yellow for now. Cleveland State as well, I think, could be in the yellow, but I think it's looking more like red right now. They're 4th overall, 9-5 in the conference, and they will face all 3 teams in the top 3. And they've had some close matchups this year as well against that upper three echelons in the Horizon League. Lost to Milwaukee by 4 and to Northern Kentucky by 1. Youngstown State was a little bit more of a blowout as they lost by 14. If you look at the Vikings schedule, you got another matchup against Youngstown State at home, Northern Kentucky at home, Milwaukee on the road. As I mentioned, again, pretty good setup overall. And I think if Cleveland can get some of those wins and maybe even enter that top three, again, a tough test for this Viking side. They could get into yellow, but for now, I've got to put them at red. Wright State, 6-8 in the conference. Again, not much upside for the Raiders. If you look at their performance so far in the Horizon League, they're currently 6-7, kind of towards the bottom half of it. They'll need a miracle run to get to the tournament. For now, they're also red. So that wraps up my coverage today of Buckeye Sports Breakdown as I talked Bengals and recently just talked college basketball and the chances of each Ohio team of making the big dance this year. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Mahir Sinhasan, and we'll see you next week right here on Buckeye Sports Breakdown.